Hello everybody, this is Aaron Stockhausen here again. It's been about 8 months since I did my instructional video series for you guys on the rope solo lead climbing, and in those 8 months I've done a bunch of more rope solo climbs, and I've learned and developed some more and better techniques. So let's say you've just hiked up to a sport climbing wall and you want to do some rope soloing. Here's a sport climbing wall. Okay, as you can see, we've got 3 routes. We've got one here, the orange route. We'll pretend that's the one we're climbing today. And we've got another route here, whoop, and a third route here. So how do we make a ground anchor? Let's pretend there are no trees and no natural protection place, no cracks or crevices to put in cams or nuts, nothing like that. So how are you going to create a ground anchor? Okay, so what I've done is basically used 2 bolts and equalized them in an innovative fashion, and 2 equalized bolts is an anchor. If you look at the top of the sport climbs, you'll see 2 equalized bolts makes an anchor. So what I've done is I've taken 2 bolts, one from the first route, one from the second route, the first bolts closest to the ground, and I've created an anchor out of them. Okay, then the rope runs over to my climb. Okay, so what I've done is here on the first climb, the leftmost climb, the first bolt, what I've done is a double figure 8 with the 2 tails, which is the strongest knot that we know of. Okay, I'll of course want to use the strongest knot humanly possible. Okay, and I've attached it to the first bolt with a locking carabiner. So that's a good basis to build an anchor, using the strongest knot possible. Okay, now we run over to the second bolt. You never want to trust your life to one bolt, so we're backed up to this bolt here. Now what I've done is, again with the locking carabiner, I've attached to the first bolt of the middle climb, okay, with a butterfly knot. The reason I used a butterfly knot is because it's directional in all directions. It can pull this way and be strong, it can pull this way and be strong, and it has a loop and can attach to something. So the butterfly knot is perfect for this setup. Okay, then over to our climb. The first bolt we clip will likely get pulled in a sideways fashion because our anchor is directly to the side. Okay, and that's not exactly the greatest idea. So what I would recommend is pre-clipping 2 bolts before doing your climb. The first bolt sort of fixes up the rope, okay, but it gets cocked out sideways. The second bolt will take care of that sideways directional loading problem. So if you pre-clip 2 bolts and you climb on this end of the rope, you will be good to go. Very safe setup on a 2-bolt equalized anchor. So this is a generalized idea of how it works. Now let's look at the details. The details are everything. The details can make it safe or unsafe. So I like to be as safe as possible. So let's think about the details here. Okay, we need these 2 equalized bolts to be equalized in a somewhat tensioned fashion. Okay, now if you have a big loop of slack between your equalized bolts, okay, this is a bad idea. So let's think what would happen in case of a fall. We pull on this end really hard because we're climbing, we fall, boom. Okay, the rope is going to pull first onto your butterfly knot. Now, this is the least strong of the 2 knots we have. So let's just think, what would happen if this bolt blew? Okay, this bolt blows. Now, this is going to come under tension on your backup bolts, the second bolt, but there's a big loop of slack. So what you're going to have is you're going to fall extra far, boom, and you're going to shock load this bolt. Shock loading is very bad. You know, there are many situations where this bolt could fail. Let's say your carabiner was kind of like that, and you shock loaded it. Bam! Possible to break the bolt or the carabiner. I've seen both of those things happen. So, that's bad. Let me show you how to pay attention to detail and make it as safe as possible. So, what we need to have is this bolt and this bolt equalize with tension between them. So, the carabiners should be pointed, because of the tension, they should be pointed at each other, not hanging loosely down with gravity, but under tension horizontally. Okay? That's tricky to do. How do we do that? I will tell you. The secret is to first tie your butterfly knot. Let me show you from scratch. So the secret to doing this anchor under tension is to tie the butterfly knot first. So thinking ahead, you need to leave a long tail of rope which will be creating the triple figure eight. So next step, I have my butterfly. I made, in between the two bolts, I made the single figure eight, then I clipped it in to this bolt. Now I'm going to start finishing the triple figure eight. So now what I've done is I've taken the end of the rope and gone through the bottom, around the top, and back through the bottom again. Now what that's done is kind of created, in a sense, a pulley for me to now pull tight, to put tension into the system. Okay? So by pulling this rope tight, I can now put tension into the system. Then if I hold that piece, okay, kind of like that, takes two hands. So I've now put tension here. Now with this piece of rope here, I'm going to finish the triple figure eight, and it will be just a bit of tension. Doesn't have to be a lot of tension, but just enough so that there's no extra falling and shock loading happening in case this bolt were to blow. So here you've got the finished setup. If you'll notice, triple figure eight here, butterfly here, climbing route there. Okay. So, to recap, first tie the butterfly. Then tie a single figure eight between the two bolts, right in the middle. Then loop the rope through the carabiner of the first bolt and pull tight. Then finish the triple figure eight, and you will have created a tensioned anchor equalizing the two bolts. Now, one extra cool thing that happens if you did it just right is that this bolt, or sorry, this carabiner and butterfly knot will have pulled sideways because this is under tension. Now when you climb, it will want to pull back this direction. Okay? That is actually a good thing, because what it does is while you're climbing, let's say you were to fall, this middle piece, the butterfly knot, is taking the most load. But the load is a bit lessened because of this backup bolt under tension. So we're actually adding the stretch here of the rope stretch into your final setup. So this is actually a stretchable, dynamic, and equalized anchor. Very innovative. So it puts a little bit of stretch into your system. Very minimal. Only 6 inches, something like that. Nothing that's going to make you fall far, but it's going to reduce the shock loading on your entire system. Let's look at one more scenario. That would be two cams being a ground anchor, or nuts, any protections, two natural protection pieces instead of the bolt. Okay? Now, the problem with a natural protection anchor is that as you climb, there's no tension in the rope until you fall. So what's going to happen is the rope's going to go like this throughout your climbing. And as you can probably understand, just like that, the cams can walk, especially if you have nuts. Nuts can slide out. All of a sudden, you don't have a ground anchor anymore. Ah, dead. Very bad. How do we fix that problem? The butterfly knot. Let me show you. Here's the answer. Here you've got your two cams, two pieces of protection equalized, even though they're at different lengths. You can use the triple figure eight to equalize them. But again, remember, I did that second. First, I tied the butterfly on a bolt somewhere between the ground anchor and my route. Okay? Just like in the previous setup. Tied this one first, then under mild tension, I equalized the main ground anchor. That way, when there's tension between here, there's always a directional force pulling on the cams just a little bit, but what that does is it assures that the cams can't wiggle a lot, and it will prevent them from walking out, and it will keep the cams pointed perfectly the way you want them. And before you even set off on your climb, you can look at everything, you can see that everything's got perfect angles, you can make sure that your two pieces are placed really well, and you can be assured that they're going to stay in line if a fall happened. Alright, so there are some of my new tips for rope solo anchoring and rope system setups, that sort of thing. They've come in really handy for me. Each time I go rope soloing, literally every time, I'm tweaking my setup just a little bit, and it gets better every time. So I can't stress enough the importance of playing with your system. Okay? Today, I wanted to go climbing. I had plans to go climbing, but the weather turned to crap. It's raining, wet, overcast, no good for climbing. So what did I do? I busted out all the gear. I played with it. Well, this time I showed you guys what I've learned. But, you know, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where there's no rocks for a 7-hour drive. And I had a lot of time to play with my gear. And I learned a lot. Lots of stuff in the basement, playing with my gear. I practiced all the knots. I read tons of books, internet web pages, all about rigging. I practiced all my knots. If you don't love rigging, if you really don't like it, rope solo lead climbing, it's not for you. It's a lot of rigging, a lot of thinking involved, and if that's not appealing to you, I really recommend that you don't do rope soloing, because when you're pushing the limits like that, you need to have 100% confidence in your system, in your ground anchor, in your whole setup. It's got to be perfect. You got to feel great about it. You don't want to be lazy, take shortcuts to do anything stupid, because it's your life. That's it. You only get one chance. So really practice your rigging, practice all kinds of things that you don't even think you're going to need. I never thought I'd use the butterfly. Very few applications for the butterfly, but you know, I came up with a great system using the butterfly knot, a very obscure knot, and you know, it's a great system. I feel really good and confident on that system now. I use it on most of my setups now. But really, the number one thing is to pay attention to the details. The details are everything. Sometimes you have to break or bend a few rules in the climbing world to actually make your system better. You know, for example, using the butterfly knot doesn't test out as strong as, say, a double figure eight, but it's directional in both ways. And there are many examples of bending or breaking the rules to fix certain problems in certain situations. So you got to think outside the box. Don't think about what you've been told. Just use your brain, what you know, learn as much as you can, think about everything when you're out there. And all right, Aaron Stockhausen signing off. Hope you learned some stuff. Start thinking, create your own stuff, and tell me about it. Maybe I'll tweak my system. Thanks a lot.